anything. He paid no attention. As I started down the hall after him, I saw what Peter had been carrying, a slipper of Mrs. Ladley's. It was soaked with water. Evidently, Peter had found it floating at the foot of the stairs. Although the idea of murder had not entered my head at that time, the slipper gave me a turn. I picked it up and looked at it. A black one with a beaded toe, short in the vamp and high-heeled, the sort most actresses wear. Then I went back and knocked at the door of the front room again. "What the devil do you want now?" he called from beyond the door. "Here's a slipper of Mrs. Ladley's," I said. "Peter found it floating in the lower hall." He opened the door wide and let me in. The room was in tolerable order, much better than when Mrs. Ladley was about. He looked at the slipper, but he did not touch it. "I don't think that is hers," he said. "I've seen her wear it 100 times." "Well, she'll never wear it again." And then, seeing me stare, he added, "It's ruined with the water. Throw it out. And, by the way, I'm sorry, but I set fire to one of the pillow slips, dropped asleep, and my cigarette did the rest. Just put it on the bill." He pointed to the bed. One of the pillows had no slip, and the ticking cover had a scorch or two on it. I went over and looked at it. "The pillow will have to be paid for too, Mr. Ladley," I said, "and there's a sign nailed on the door that forbids smoking in bed. If you're going to set fire to things, I shall have to charge extra." "Really?" he jeered, looking at me with his cold, fishy eyes. "Is there any sign on the door saying that boarders are charged extra for 7 feet of filthy river in the bedrooms?" I was never a match for him, and I make it a principle never to bandy words with my boarders. I took the pillow and the slipper and went out. The telephone was ringing on the stair landing. It was the theater asking for Miss Brice. "She has gone away," I said. "What do you mean? Moved away?" "Gone for a few days' vacation," I replied. "She isn't playing this week, is she?" "Wait a moment," said the voice. There was a hum of conversation from the other end, and then another man came to the telephone. "Can you find out where Miss Brice has gone?" "I'll see." I went to the Ladleys' door and knocked. Mr. Ladley answered from just beyond. "The theater is asking where Mrs. Ladley is." "Tell them I don't know," he snarled, and shut the door. I took his message to the telephone. Whoever it was swore and hung up the receiver. All the morning I was uneasy. I hardly knew why. Peter felt it as I did. There was no sound from the Ladleys' room, and the house was quiet, except for the lapping water on the stairs and the police patrol going back and forth. At 11 o'clock a boy in the neighborhood, paddling on a raft, fell into the water and was drowned. I watched the police boat go past, carrying his little cold body, and after that I was good for nothing. I went and sat with Peter on the stairs. The dog's conduct had been strange all morning. He had sat just above the water, looking at it and whimpering. Perhaps he was expecting another kitten, or— It is hard to say how ideas first enter one's mind, but the notion that Mr. Ladley had killed his wife and thrown her body into the water came to me as I sat there. All at once I seemed to see it all. The quarreling the day before, the night trip in the boat, the water-soaked slipper, his haggard face that morning, even the way the spaniel sat and stared at the flood. Terry brought the boat back at 11:30, towing it behind another. "Well," I said from the stairs, "I hope you've had a pleasant morning." "What doing?" he asked, not looking at me. "Roaming about the streets. You've had that boat for hours." He tied it up without a word to me, but he spoke to the dog. "Good morning, Peter," he said. "It's nice weather for fishes, ain't it?" He picked out a bit of floating wood from the water, and showing it to the dog, flung it into the parlor. Peter went after it with a splash. He was pretty fat, and when he came back I heard him wheezing. But what he brought back was not the stick of wood. It was the knife I used for cutting bread. It had been on the shelf in the room where I had slept the night before, and now Peter brought it out of the flood where its wooden handle had kept it afloat. The blade was broken off short. It is not unusual to find one's household goods floating around during flood time. More than once I've lost a chair or two, and seen it after the water had gone down, new, scrubbed and painted, in Molly Maguire's kitchen next door. And perhaps now and then a bit of luck would come to me. A dog kennel or a chicken house, or a kitchen table, or even, as happened once, a month-old baby in a wooden cradle that lodged against my back fence and had come 40 miles, as it turned out, with no worse mishaps than a cold in its head. But the knife was different. I'd put it on the mantel over the stove I was using upstairs the night before, and hadn't touched it since. As I sat staring at it, Terry took it from Peter and handed it to me. "Better give me a penny, Mrs. Pitman," he said in his impudent Irish way. "I had to give you a knife. It may cut our friendship." I reached over to hit him a clout on the head, but I did not. The sunlight was coming in through the window at the top of the stairs and shining on the rope that was tied to the banister. The end of the rope was covered with stains, brown with a glint of red in them. I got up, shivering. "You can get the meat at the butcher's, Terry," I said, "and come back for me in a half hour." Then I turned and went upstairs, weak in the knees, to put on my hat and coat. I'd made up my mind that there had been murder done. End of chapter 2.